All right, Jim, are you okay to get started?
I am.
All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Job Search 101, which is part of our Get That Job webinar series. My name is Jordan Neal, and I am the career librarian here at the Champaign Public Library. So thank you all for joining us. Before I introduce our speaker, I wanted to mention some library information that we will reiterate at the end of the webinar, as well as some webinar details. So as you may know or have heard, the library has opened to the public with some modifications to the services that we offer. I invite you to visit our website, champaign.org, for more information. We are now available to answer your questions in person and virtually. You can email us at librarian@champaign.org. We are still offering our Book a Librarian service virtually if you need any help at home. To request a session, visit champaign.org/bookalibrarian to fill out our request form. We are also still offering our curbside service. If you want to pick up any library items, or you can now come into the library to pick up those items, whichever you'd prefer. Again, visit our website, champaign.org/curbside for more information. And as always, our e-library is always open, where you can enjoy ebooks, movies, and more using your Champaign Public Library card, or you can sign up for a virtual library card through our website for instant access. Finally, I would like to briefly go over a few features available to you that might help during this particular webinar. Depending on your computer or device, if you take a look at your Zoom window, you can hopefully see audio settings at the bottom left of the screen. You can adjust your audio settings, like changing your speaker by clicking or tapping on the upward arrow next to your speaker. Moving to the center bottom of your screen, you will see a chat and raised hand option. Clicking on the chat will open or close a chat box on the right side of your Zoom window, or sometimes it displays on the middle of your screen, and you can just drag it around, again, depending on your computer or device. We invite you to use the chat to ask questions or leave comments for us, and our presenter will try to answer them throughout the presentation. You also have the option to raise hand to receive assistance. You can use this if you're having any technical difficulties or you would like to speak and ask a question, so we can unmute you if you prefer not to type in the chat. Again, our presenter is happy to answer questions throughout the webinar, so please feel free to ask your questions. We will also leave some time at the end as well. So without further delay, I would like to introduce our presenter, Jim Hill. Jim actually has been with the Career and Networking Center based in Naperville, Illinois for the last 18 years. He enjoys sharing his knowledge with job seekers, including a wide array of experience as an executive in the technology field, as well as finance. We're so happy he could join us today. So with that, Jim, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to put my slides on the screen too. You everybody see that okay?
Yes, I can see that.
You can see it is obviously it's a little bit interesting to be. I'm just talking to my computer. I can't see anybody's face, but so as Jordan said, I'm happy to take questions throughout. And actually, I prefer that. I think just for me, talking for an hour might get a little monotonous. So if you want me to expand on something I say or have a question about something I say, please jump in. Just a little bit about the Career Networking Center. As Jordan said, we are based in Naperville. We are a 501c3 charitable organization. Founded in 1992. I started there in 2002. So it was already 10 years old when I started there, and I can't believe I'm coming up pretty close to my 20-year anniversary. Our mission hasn't changed. Our mission, in fact, the reason we were founded was really to provide an alternative and for job seekers that perhaps didn't get the benefit from their employer or professional outplacement assistance. And that was, a gap that a lot of community leaders saw. And so that's why we were started, really to be an outplacement center and provide the environment and the coaching and the tools and the resources for people to conduct their job search. Our mission is not to find you a job. Our mission is to support you in your own job search and hopefully teach you some things, but you find the job. We just help you along the way and give you the support and education and training and advice that we know proves helpful. My own background, as Jordan mentioned, is I'm currently retired, so I don't work in the Fortune 100 work anymore. I still teach occasionally. I'm an adjunct professor at Benedictine University, which is in Lisle, right next door to Naperville. My corporate experience began with Accenture and continued to some of the companies you see here, McDonald's, CNA, US Cellular, and more, as a finance and technology executive. And my own experience is actually 5 job changes in my 40 some odd year career, which I think is fairly normal. My first job change didn't actually occur until after I'd been with Accenture for over 25 years. So it was a bit of a learning process for me. And that's kind of what I bring to the Career Networking Center, is just that experience, what I learned along the way, what worked for me. And since I've been a volunteer at the Career Networking Center for 18 years, I've seen what works for a lot of other people, and that's what I'll try to share a little bit with you tonight, is that experience. And I invite you all to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can see there are a lot of Jim Hills on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, is, those of you that are members know, has someone like 500 million members, and I think there must be at least 1 million Jim Hills out there. So this is me. You can see the URL on the screen. So copy that down, and I invite you all to connect with me. And if I can share connections or share anything with you, I'm always happy to do that, because that's fundamentally, as I mentioned, I found I went through 5 job changes, and every one of them was facilitated by someone else, a networking contact, someone that, in a lot of cases, it was somebody that I met during the job search. It wasn't somebody that I knew prior, and so I'm sort of feel that giving back is important, because a lot of people help me along the way, and I'd like to help other people. So that's about me, and I guess I'll start this whole process with something that you probably already know, but that as a species, humans don't like change. We're pretty adaptable to change. That's why we're the dominant species on the planet, because we survived the meteor strike and the dinosaurs didn't. So we're adaptable, but we don't like it. Change is difficult. Change breaks our routine. Change makes us feel off. Change is a lot of things, and a job change, particularly a sudden one. And as I mentioned before, all but one of mine were sudden job changes. One of them was my own idea. I left a company because I found a better opportunity, but the other 4 were, you get called into the boss's office one day, and they tell you that this is your last day. If you want to watch a great movie about that, you can watch the movie Up in the Air. It's kind of interesting that it does sort of show and demonstrate those emotions. And you all have been through it. You're going through it. I think it's just important to realize that, for starters, you're going to feel bad. You shouldn't try to avoid it. It's actually part of the healing process. Job loss and job change is a grieving process. It's actually, I think, doctors will tell you, it's of the 5 worst things that can happen to you, including death of a spouse and the divorce. Job change is right up there in the top 5. So you do go through these phases of my gosh, what just happened to me, and no, this couldn't happen, and then you're depressed, this is hard, it's my fault, and then finally, you climb up, what's called climbing out of the valley, and you get to that place at the top where, okay, now you know where you're going, you know what you're doing, you've embraced the change, you've embraced the job search, and you're on your way. But everybody goes through it. It's going to take you, just embrace it, just do it, just know that when you get up to the top, it's better, and you have to recognize where you are, and you get through it. So, and the most important thing, like I try to put here, is get advice and network like crazy. Networking means talk to everybody and meet a lot of people, and seek out advice, and talk to other job seekers, and talk to friends, and talk to family, talk to neighbors. Tell everybody literally everybody that you're looking for a job, because ultimately, your next job is probably going to be a result of someone helping you, making an introduction, pointing you to a job, introducing you to your future boss, something like that. And if people don't know you're looking for a job, obviously they're not going to be inclined to help you. So tell everybody and seek out their advice, and you will get through it. I mean, change is hard, but you will get through it. Most important thing, what I call us getting through the valley, is focus on the future and stop criticizing yourself. Stop second guessing what you could have done. You know, why me? Why was it? You know, why me? What could I have done differently? Why did they? You know, when they drew up the list of layoffs, why did they pick me? You know, get over it and move on. And remember, always remember that. You know, a lot of us like to be defined by our jobs, but our job doesn't define us. Our job is really just a part of us. You know, we're so much more. We're husbands, we're mothers, we're fathers, we're sons and daughters and aunts and uncles and cousins, and we're part of a family, and we're friends, and we're neighbors, and we're part of our religious organization, and we're part of our community. And the job title that I used to have is just a part of that. It's just part of that. It does not define you. And then most importantly, though, is where you don't have a paying job, treat your job search as a full-time job. It is your job, and you have to follow an organized search process, and you have to hold yourself accountable to just like you were going to work. So it is a full-time job. It's just it's a little bit different, but don't be alone. That's the other part of it. You know, find other people that will hold you accountable, and recognize, and I know this is true for me, recognize that oftentimes it's better to get advice and accountability from strangers, from people who are not necessarily your friends, their acquaintances, their fellow job seekers, but they're not your loved ones and not your friends, because the people that love you and your friends, they will always, at least for a time, lay you off the hook. Oh, it's okay. Oh, you took last week off and you didn't look for a job, honey. Oh, that's okay. You know, that's fine. Next week will be better. But that's really not helping. That's really not helping you, and that's why accountability, particularly again from outsiders, is helpful, and it's important. Some of the I know these are some of the things that I faced. You know, my first layoff occurred when I was 49 years old. So yeah, I wasn't 50. So everybody told me, "Oh, you're not 50, so you're not too old." Well, by the time I found another job, I was 50. So, you know, age is a factor. It doesn't mean that you're never going to get hired again. There is no magic age at which you won't get hired again. And in fact, many companies and many hiring managers look at as the older you are, the more wisdom you have, and the more important you are, the more knowledge you have. And a lot of people think, well, it's harder to get a job if you don't have a job. That's kind of true, but the reality is that so many people now have gone through unemployment, not just currently, but in the last 20 years or more, as we've endured, you know, multiple up and down job cycles and recessions and expansions, that just about everybody has been through unemployment. So they understand what it's like to not have a job, and there's not, you know, any stigma in not having a job. They call it transition for a reason, because it is a transition from one job to the next. A lot of other things that, you know, one thing I hear a lot, we're past the summer season now, where people says, "Oh, just take the summer off because there's no point in searching for a job." Not true. Don't take the holidays off. I actually, you know, one of my job searches, I actually got the job offer on Christmas Eve, because the day before I had gone through an interview with the hiring manager, and I was actually in the snowstorm, and, you know, she didn't want to go in the office, so we met at a Starbucks close to her house. And we talked for like 4 hours. And then the next day, which is Christmas Eve, you know, they offered me a job, and I started my new job the day after New Year's. So anytime is the right time for job search. There's no bad time. And in fact, holidays, you know, the one advantage of holidays is that people tend to be a little more accessible, because they don't have as many meetings. They're not, you know, running from place to place as much. So it's actually, you know, as we move into the eventually Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays, those are actually good times to be networking. Getting online is, I will talk more about that. It's kind of a necessary part of how you get a job, but you have to avoid not spending all your time online, because remembering that it's still people that hire people. It's not computers that hire people. So, you know, the computer is necessary. That's how you get in the door, but you're going to get hired by a person, and oftentimes it takes networking to find that person. So don't spend all your time online. I tell people that you know, the internet is open at night. The internet is open pretty much 24/7, seven days a week. So you can be online anytime. But people that you want to talk to, people that you want to meet, they're only available in a smaller window of time. So don't waste that time being online. You know, be online when there's no time, no opportunities to talk to people. A few things that I'll talk about that might be new. They're not always new. Resumes, for the most part, are distributed electronically now. So you don't, but they still need to look good when they're printed, because people still occasionally print them, but you certainly don't need to spend a lot of money anymore on fancy resume paper or anything like that, because for the most part, you're going to be sharing your resume electronically via email or something else. But every once in a while, it will get printed because somebody just wants to have a copy that they can look at and make notes on, and it's easier. Most companies do use what are called applicant tracking systems, ATS, to screen and evaluate and organize and prioritize applicants. So it's important to understand that the first view of your resume and your application is going to be done by a computer. And so that's why keywords, and that's how most of them work, you know, keywords that sort of define your value and your experience are important. For whatever those keywords are for your industry and your background, it's important that those appear on your resume. Other things, I did these slides back in originally, I think back in February, and I said online video interviews are common. Well, online interviews are now the only interview you're going to get. Everybody is online. It's likely that you'll get hired, and you'll get hired, and it may be some time before you actually meet your coworkers face to face. You know, one of my neighbors got a job in June. He's yet to go to the office. He's been working out of his house ever since, and still hasn't gone to the office. So get comfortable with video. It's likely to be your life. Not only in your job search, but afterwards. Most companies will use some form of what's called behavioral interviewing, and that's where learning the STAR technique. And so it's one thing that we teach a lot, and others will talk about. STAR stands for Situation, Task, Action, Result. It's an acronym that guides you in how to answer questions. You might get a question that says, well, Jim, tell me about a difficult customer that you had and how you dealt with them. And what I'm asking you to do is tell me a little bit about how you operate with customers. So ask would be, you describe when it happened, where you were working. The task would be, you know, what was your responsibilities at the time? What were you asked to do? Action, what did you do? And result is what happened. And so this is a way of illustrating your strengths and your accomplishments in 90 seconds or so. And I tell people interviewing, I know it was for me. As I mentioned, you know, my first job lasted for 26 years, so I didn't do a lot of interviewing during that time. And it's not like riding a bicycle. If you haven't done it in a while, you probably have an accident. I know I did. So practice, and then practice some more, and then practice more. Pretend you're a professional athlete. They practice all the time, and interviewing is the same thing. No matter how good you are, you can always use more practice. And that's another thing that we offer through the Career Networking Center. It's just the opportunity to continually practice and hone your networking skills. Social media is important, especially LinkedIn. You know, not so much Facebook. Facebook, I still relegate to social media, although companies do advertise on Facebook. LinkedIn is probably the most important. Twitter, very powerful and prevalent as well. So you know, one of your actions, if you're not already, is to check out LinkedIn and become a power user of LinkedIn, and at the same time get a little more proficient with Twitter. You know, establish a presence there, and figure out, you know, what companies you want to follow on both those platforms, Twitter as LinkedIn, and Facebook. You can actually follow companies on Facebook to figure out what they're up to and whether they're expanding. I think it's a reality too that most, if not all, you know, recruiters or HR professionals, once you hit their radar, once they see your resume and say, this might be a good candidate, they're 98% likely to go look you up on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, see what they can learn more about you as a result of social media, particularly people that you know. And that's why LinkedIn is so valuable, because as a hiring manager, what I always did is when I knew once I had a person's name and I knew I was going to interview them, then I wanted to see, well, who do I know that knows them, that can give me some insight to them, and that's where LinkedIn is so valuable. So the lesson learned here is establish a presence, get good at it, and it will pay off in the future in terms of networking contacts, and recognize that it's kind of like part of your resume. It's part of your portfolio of information about yourself. I think I mentioned this earlier. The biggest mistake for most people is spending all your time applying online. Like you, I watched the news, and particularly during the pandemic. You see stories, and you see some well-dressed man or woman with a great background saying, I've applied for 250 jobs in the last month and I haven't gotten anything. And my answer is, if that's all you're doing, then yeah, I'm not surprised. Because you don't get a job by simply putting in an application and waiting for the phone to ring or to get an email back. You have to network, you have to find people, you have to find connections. Of course, you'll hear stories all the time of people say, well, I applied and I got a job. And that's true, that happens. You also hear stories of people who say, I bought a lottery ticket and I won. And the odds are about the same. The odds are roughly equivalent. If all you do is spend your time online, it's about like playing the lottery. So biggest mistake is doing that and neglecting, all the other things. I think the other mistake I think people make, particularly when it comes to resumes and talking about themselves, is they focus on their job responsibilities and not the results. As a hiring manager, you want to hire somebody who can, you can kind of boil it down that says, I want somebody who can save money or get new customers or keep the customers I have, or solve a problem that I have. And that's results. I want people that have done that before. So, talking about, well, I was responsible for, accounts payable and 20 people, that doesn't tell me anything about what you're going to do for me, other than you had a big job, but what did you do with it? What did you accomplish? So I think a lot of people want to focus, talk about their responsibilities. I tell people, I'm going to hire you because of the results that you've achieved in the past. I see a lot of resumes where people talk about how self-motivated, self-starting, passionate, et cetera, that they are. And those are just kind of cliched, overused, sort of self-described characteristics. And candidly, they're words that most hiring managers don't pay a lot of attention to. So don't waste a lot of resume space talking about how passionate you are. Because if you truly are, we'll figure that out when we interview you, but I'm not going to just take your word for it because you wrote it on your resume. And I always tell people that, taking a bad job is still a bad idea. So you always want to, everybody has criteria and they know what's worked for them in the past. And if something, you work your way all the way through the process, the interview, and you get the offer, but it still doesn't feel right, then it's okay to walk away. And I've done that. I've not often, but I did that because I could tell it just was not a good situation, and I passed, and I found a much better situation. So just taking a job because you feel like you need a job is, if it's a bad job, it's not going to pay off. Let me just pause for a minute. Jordan, anybody ask a question?
No questions at this point.
Okay, great. All right. I'll keep talking, but like I said, feel free to step in. So most important thing is in your strategies, spend some time to—
Jim, a question just came through.
Okay.
I'm going to allow this person to talk. So
great.
Celia.
Okay. Hi, Celia. You're still muted.
I think I've unmuted you, Celia. So
okay, here I am.
Oh, there you go. Hi, Celia.
Hi. I have a question about like that STAR technique. You said it was situation, technique, and what was it? Something action?
No, it's situation, task, action, result. So Situation, task, action, and result. So, you know, I asked you a question. Tell me a time where you had a difficult customer. Where you did. The way you would answer that would first give me the context. Well, it was when when I worked at Accenture and I was a manager and I was responsible for software support. That's the situation. Task is, you know, my boss says this customer is, you know, feels like our software isn't working too well. You need to talk to them. All right, so that's the task. Action, I engage the customer, listen to their story, talked about how we can support them, talked about the future, how we were going to fix the software, and how we would help them through that. And the result was, you know, much happier customer, signed up to renew and buy some new products from us. So situation, task, action, result. Sometimes you'll hear it. Different offers might call it problem, action, result, PAR or STA. I like STAR because it kind of separates the problem into the situation and the task.
And then the thing about descriptive words, like I was passionate or I'm passionate about this. Would you put something like that in a cover letter though?
You know, I don't, you can, but to me, they're always, as a hiring manager, they're always kind of wasted words. You only got my attention. You only got my attention for 10 seconds. Think about it. Even in a cover letter, you got my attention for 10 seconds. Don't waste it telling me stuff that I can figure out when I meet you. You know, we can talk about your passion, and I can see your eyes light up when you talk about something. Tell me more about your results and your accomplishments, because that's, you know, when you're writing, that's what's important. The personal characteristics, I'll figure out when I see you, when we talk. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Good questions. Both good questions. Any more? Okay.
Yep.
So I plow on.
Right now. Yes.
Great. All right. So know your added value. Know what it is that, you know, if somebody says, why should I hire you? It should come right off the top of your head. You should hire me because I know how to, you know, in my case, I worked in technology and finance, and they said, you know, you should hire me because I know that you spend $100 million a year on IT, and I can save you 10 million right off the bat because I know where you're wasting money. That's, you know, that would be your value proposition. So know what you can do, back it up with your accomplishments, but know your added value, and that's kind of how you both sell yourself, and how you answer that. Why should I hire you? Again, like I said, networking is the key. I'll talk a little bit more about how to do that in a minute, but it starts by just meeting people. Not only connecting with people that you already know, but meeting, you know, new people through job clubs, transition clubs. We offer, you know, we have a weekly job club at the Career Networking Center. It's virtual, so anybody can join in from any part of the world. It's an opportunity to meet other people, to meet job seekers, and to learn about opportunities. So networking, but it's also important when you're networking always to tell your story and tell it the same way that reflects who you are. I call it personal branding. You know, my personal branding was, I save companies money. I know where to look, and I know how to save them money when it comes to technology. And that's what makes me great for the job. And I said that every time I introduced myself to someone. It was part of my, you may have heard the term elevator speech, which is how your 90 seconds of fame, how you tell your story to someone new. I always tell it the same way, and it reflects, my brand and my value. And that's really important, because even when you're meeting fellow job seekers, when they connect you with a brand, then the next time that they see a job or they hear about a job opportunity that's not right for them, but they think, oh, yeah, Jim, that guy, he's the guy that, knows IT and finance. And yeah, because he's told me that, every time I meet him. So that brand actually helps other people, look for positions that are right, for you. The search process for me, a lot of people will draw and I'll get there in a minute. A lot of people draw the search process as a sort of a straight line, beginning to end, steps along the way. And that's kind of partially true. The challenge is you really never know when it's going to end. So the line has a indefinite ending point. The line always ends with finding a new job, but you don't know when it's going to end, because candidly, like everything, there is some luck. There is a luck factor that says, being in the right place at the right time. But I've also believed that people, to a large extent, can make their own luck or can influence their own luck. So for me, job search was always kind of a confluence of events. And it was, I always focused my activity on 3 circles. One is, knowing my target companies and positions. So having a very clear understanding of what companies might hire me and for what role. The other was having the right, what I call collateral, the resume, a handbill, business cards, elevator speech I mentioned earlier. These are all things that are important as you meet people. And then networking both groups, one-on-one, LinkedIn, very important. And I mentioned the personal brand. So I always made sure I was paying attention to all of these things. Typically, in the course of a week, most of my effort would be on networking. But some of it was spent, refining target companies and looking for new positions, and some of it was spent, just refining the collateral. Because I knew if I again, I didn't know when the search would end, but I knew if I was focusing my energies and my efforts on the right places, that it would end with the confluence of these 3 activities. So you can draw this process as a line beginning to end, but at some point it becomes, like I said, it becomes a confluence of activities that you have to make sure that you're focused on and doing. If you've never read The Unwritten Rules of the Highly Effective Job Search by Oral Person, it's a great book to read because it does talk about the process. Now he talks about it sort of, beginning to end, which is, again, kind of true. It's just, like I said, you never know how long the line is going to be. But briefly, I'll walk you through just a few of the 10 steps and talk about why they're important. And the first one is understanding what you are and what you want. And there's a variety of ways. If you've never done like Strength Finders is a good one, or other sort of psychological kind of evaluations that talk a little bit about, what kind of work you do, how you like to work, do you like to work in teams, do you like to work individually, what are your strengths? But it's important to really, really understand yourself. Not only just, like, as I said earlier, about what were your duties and your responsibilities, but more importantly, what did you accomplish, along the way. And it's always a good idea, actually, when you're starting your job search. My first coach did this for me. Like day one, job search, and I met with him, and he said, "Okay, Jim, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write." He explained STAR to me. And he said, "Write that acronym down, STAR. Write it on 20 pieces. Write it on a piece of paper. Go make 20 copies of it. Now go fill in each one of those with a story about yourself. But make it a good one. Talk about a situation and an accomplishment or result that you're proud of. But you got to come up with 20 of them." So it took me a few days to do this, scratch my head, but it was really a great exercise in remembering the value and the things that, were important to me, and the accomplishments that I was really proud of and that I really wanted to talk about. So it's always a good idea, if you're just starting, if this is like day one or week one of your job search, spend a little time reflecting on this, particularly on your accomplishments and your strengths. And then define your targets. What's your ideal job and what's your ideal company? The two kind of go together. For me, my experience was always in very, very large public companies, Fortune 100. That was where I fit. For me, chasing a job with a middle market company, a small business, didn't make a lot of sense because that wasn't my background. But for other people, that might be exactly. You might be more entrepreneurial and more. More rounded and more versatile, and you fit better, in a smaller company where you can wear multiple hats. It's important that you understand and you define those opportunities, and be able to tell a good story to people that, when I ask you, say, well, what are your target companies? To tell me why. When you give me a list, and I've unfortunately met with job seekers, they give me a list that look like they just copied the phone book. Because it was every company in the area, A to Z, and it didn't make a lot of sense given their background. So spend some time figuring out, once you know your value, then where can you sell that to? Where can you sell that value? It's important to do all the written documents. Resume, you probably know a lot about. Resume, but again, focus on your accomplishments. A handbill is kind of like a mini resume. It's something that you would use for networking. It's not something you would submit for a job application because it includes, lists of target companies and target positions. But it's very important information for you to share with your network and with people who may help you. And business cards, once we get back to being able to face-to-face, they're not much use now. I have a whole slew of them that are sitting in my desk drawer that I haven't been able to give anybody for 6 months. But once we get back to the face-to-face, it is important to have business cards that you can share as you meet somebody for coffee or meet somebody for lunch. Recognizing that you're often in situations where you might be sharing a meal or you're sharing a cup of coffee, and it's kind of difficult to pass out a great big 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, when all you really want to do is give somebody your phone number and email address. And so invest a little money in business cards. But and this is what, if you remember earlier, the slide that I showed you, this is what I call collateral documents. So develop those. Line up references, that's important too. So references would be people who you have worked with in the past that would be willing, if contacted by a prospective employer, to obviously give you good marks and a good references. My experience over the last several years has been that not every company actually goes through the bother, if you will, of checking references, because obviously that if I give you a name for somebody to contact, they're going to say good things about me. So some people question, is there really any value in that at all? But some people still do. Maybe it's 50-50, maybe it's 80-20, I'm not sure. But it's important as you begin your job search, before before some of those connections may start to fray or get in the rearview mirror, it's important to line those up. Talk to people who are and it's not always supervisors. Some people, when they ask for references, they take the 360 approach. They say, give me one superior, one subordinate, and one peer. So you kind of want to line up references using that 360 approach as well. You don't need a lot. 5 is fine. Maybe 3 to 5, something of that nature. But just be prepared. Just be prepared for that and any other interactions, as well. So get prepared, to meet a lot of people and talk to a lot of people. And cast your net wide and deep. It doesn't have to be people who do what you do, or even people who understand what you do. Not everybody in my network has a clue what I actually did for work, but I could tell them a story that they could kind of understand. But what's more importantly is that everybody knows people. And the one thing, what I find is that most people know about pretty much everybody they know is they know where they work, because it's just kind of a natural part of the conversation. Every one of my neighbors, I know where they work because we've talked about it. I work at AT&T, or I work at Exelon, or whatever. So I know that. Most of them, I don't know what they do, but I know what companies they work for. But that's okay. They know people at those companies, and if there's an opportunity where I want to meet somebody, a hiring manager, they might know them. Might not be in the same field, doesn't matter. It's just meet people, ask for advice, stay organized. That's why I love LinkedIn so much, because LinkedIn, you're connected, you have their contact, you can reach out as necessary. And always make sure you honor commitments. If you tell people you're going to follow up with them, then follow up with them. If you tell people you're going to meet them, then meet them. Nothing turns somebody off in a job search process any more than people who don't show up, who go out of their way to say, okay, I'll meet with you, and then you don't show up, or you show up, half an hour late. Even for an online meeting, show up on time for online. So, but ultimately, like I said, it's people that are going to connect you to your next job opportunity. And this is important. I mentioned earlier, companies use ATS, or applicant tracking systems. So what happens is companies advertise a position. They advertise in a variety of places on their website. It gets picked up on other places like Indeed. And so they advertise a position, and within usually a week or two, they'll get 500 resumes submitted. This is, people that are sitting there, submitting their resume. So a couple weeks, they'll get 500 people. I used to do this a lot. I hired a lot of people when I worked with US Cellular, and counterpart in HR was a recruiter, worked with him a lot. And this is exactly what he would tell me. You know, we post a position, I'd call him up. His name was Andy. I'd say, Andy, how many we got in the net? He'd say, 542. I said, okay, Andy, what I want you to do is I want you to find me 3 good candidates so we can interview. He goes, okay. I knew he didn't look at all 542 resumes. He didn't get close to that. So the first thing he did was use the computer to eliminate many of them, probably 80%, by simply just doing keyword searches and scoring. Because we had, you know, every job, you know, the company said you got to come up with 10 criteria, 10 things that are important. So, you know, on those 10 things, you'd attach a couple of keywords to them, you know, must know SAP, must know telecom, something like that. And the ATS, you'd run a search and it would, you know, up to the top would pop the resumes where those keywords were most prevalent. So, you know, typically 80%. So out of the, you know, 500, you know, Andy, my recruiting partner, would have probably about 100 that he had to really look at. And again, he didn't look at all 100 of them because he didn't have time to. He just goes through them using his kind of instinct until he knows I told him to find 3 good candidates, and that's exactly what he did. How many resumes did he look at along the way? I don't know, probably less than half of them. So the reality is somewhere in the 500, there might be better candidates, but none of us have time to find them, and the computer can't find them, and the recruiter can't find them. So you have to think every time you submit a resume, you may be the best person in there, but is anybody going to see my resume? So that's why you have to improve the odds. Improving your odds means if you're a great candidate and you know it, and it's obvious from your resume, and you're in that funnel, you're in that pile of 500, then find someone you know who knows the recruiter or the hiring manager and ask for a referral. A referral is not a reference. A reference says, I know a lot about your performance because I worked with you and I know your characteristics, et cetera. A referral is simply, I know this person, and you know me, and I wouldn't steer you wrong, and I know this person, and I've looked at their resume, and I've looked at the job description, and I think they're a good candidate, and I think if you look at it, you'd see the same thing. So turn that around as a hiring manager, and this would happen to me from time to time. I would get a call, you know, people know me, they know the job, you know, the job's out there, they know where I work, and I'd get a call or an email from someone I said, Jim, I know you're US Cellular, and I know you're, you know, this is time I was trying to hire a procurement manager, and so I know you're looking for a procurement manager. Well, I just met Julie, and you know, I met her at a networking event, and she's really got a lot of the. She showed me the job description, and I think she's a good fit. And she told me she applied, but she hadn't heard anything. I think you should take a look at her resume. I said, okay, well, I trust you. I don't think you know, I've known you for a while. So I did, and lo and behold, she was a great candidate, and you know, we hadn't found her yet, but we did, and we interviewed her, and we hired her. And so, just getting someone, you know, improving you still got to apply. You still got to apply online. You got to be in the funnel, but finding someone who knows either a recruiter or the hiring manager can guarantee that somebody looks at your resume. Now, this only works when you're a great candidate for the job and it's obvious from your resume. So you can't stretch. You know, you got to be definitely a great candidate. But if you are, then this is how networking vastly improves your odds. It takes your odds, you know, from 1 in 500 to 1 in 4. So that's a big improvement. And then finally, you know, this is what Orville says. Finally, you know, 1 through 6 are the preparation, and then 7 through 10 is the execution. And the execution is kind of goes back to my chart, where execution is really just a continuous process of networking, collateral, and targeting. So it's finding your targets, finding the job, working your networks, tracking your progress, going through that process, getting better at interviewing, practice, getting better at your interviewing until finally, you know, you'll land the offer. And I always tell people, don't screen anything out. You can't turn down a job offer that you don't have. So get the offer, Then if it doesn't meet all your criteria, then you can either bargain for something different. So don't worry about the location, and don't worry about the salary yet. And don't worry about, you know, what you've heard about the company or the environment. You'll find all that stuff out as you go through the interviewing process. But if you see a job and it's a great fit, then set aside any concerns or worries you have about the location of the company or anything else, and apply for it, and have the mindset that I'm going to get that job offer. I'm going to do my very best of networking, interviewing, and I'm going to get that job offer. And then if all my worries come true, then I'm going to turn it down. But you can't turn down a job offer that you don't have. And guess what? You may learn a lot of things. You know, the company may say, you know, you may live in Champaign, and the company says the headquarters is in Seattle. And you say, well, I don't really want to move to Seattle. Well, during the course of the interview, you find out, well, you know what? We don't want you to move either. You can just stay where you are. You'll do fine. You'll do fine. And so you'll learn a lot during the interview process that may change your mind. So never walk away from something that you can see that your resume lines up and you're a good fit for it. And then finally, you know, you can negotiate, or you can evaluate and negotiate. And the reality is that, you know, depending on the company, the situation, some things are negotiable, some things are not. And, you know, you have to get a sense of what that is, but you never negotiate before you have the job offer. Don't talk about, you know, don't ask about pay, don't ask about benefits, don't ask about career growth, all those things until they make you the offer. Then ask your important questions. And there's a reason for that, because, you know, salespeople call it mental possession. Once the company's made you an offer, okay, they have taken mental possession of you. They want you. And now if they have to negotiate to get you, they're going to be a lot more willing to do that than they are if you're just one of 3 candidates that they're considering, and you become problematic in your negotiations for more pay or more benefits. And so forget you, let me go move on to someone else that is going to be easier. So absolutely negotiate, but at the right time. And the right time to negotiate is after you have the offer, and it's part of the acceptance process. But that's kind of the you know, in a nutshell, the steps, if you will. A few other reminders is always seek out resources. Jordan will tell you libraries are excellent resources because of the experience they have in navigating various databases and information sources. Libraries are great. Most area faith-based organizations, churches, mosques, synagogues, whatever, they all offer job search outreach, and they welcome people of all faiths. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to be a member of that particular organization. It's part of the community. Don't ignore temporary contract work, gig work, whatever you want to call it. I did that for a while. It was quite rewarding, and it actually led to a full-time position with a company that I was a contractor for. So don't ignore that. You know, your college can still be useful to you, even if you're like me and you're a long way out of college. You know, my college still has a very active alumni association and industry organizations. So seek out resources. Don't find them yourself. The state, you know, through the WorkNet centers, IDES, job fairs, and then of course our career networking system center. These are also resources available to you. Our niche, as I said earlier, is we're a not-for-profit. We have a very modest membership fee. We offer workshops. We have 17, 18, 20 different workshops that we offer every month. We also offer what are called job search work teams. So these are small, 15 people, job seekers, kind of that meet once a week to share notes and coach each other. What I spend a lot of time on, a lot of our volunteers do, is one-on-one coaching. We used to offer office space and workstations. Obviously, we don't do that right now. So our offices in Palatine and Naperville, while they're still there, we're not there, because everything we're doing now, and probably like most places for the foreseeable future, is virtual. And then we also offer an executive networking group for those of you that are at the C level. we have opportunities for you to network with other C-level people as well. Just to give you a flavor, some of our workshops, for example, that we do every month, one is what's called the job search project plan. You know, what's your ideal job map, you know, following that 10-step process. Where are you in that process, and helping you focus on your targets. We do that every month. We have a resume workshop every month that sort of, again, hammers home the idea of focusing on your accomplishments, less on your responsibilities, more on your results. Understanding, you know, what applicant tracking systems do and why keywords are so important. We have a networking for success workshop, just preparing you to network like a pro, and some, you know, a few tips on building professional relationships. And for me, and for a lot of people, it's just overcoming those fears of reaching out and interacting with strangers, and how to, you know, play up yourself as opposed to being, you know, too modest. But you know, so that's networking for success. I mentioned earlier interviewing skills, so we offer lots of both, you know, a workshop once a month, kind of some interview tips, but then most importantly, the one-on-one interview coaching. The job search work teams, as I said earlier, are small groups that agree to work together. And so it's a commitment to the team to commit to your search and commit to help the other people on the team. So it's literally a small group of people committed to everyone's success, and you meet once a week and you share accomplishments and you hold each other accountable. You come up with plans every week, and then every week you start the meeting by, here was my plan, here's what I actually did. And if you deviated from your plan, it's up to your teammates to call you out and say, you know, you said you were gonna go to 3 job search transition, and you played golf. What was up with that? But it's the idea of you know, groups of job seekers to hold you accountable. And then finally, the one-on-one coaching that we offer from volunteers like myself. We have 50+ volunteers from a variety of backgrounds to share, you know, our knowledge, you know, our experience. Final thoughts. I guess the most important thing is know your value. So build your message, and then treat your job search like a full-time job, because it is your job, and take advantage of all the resources that you can. So let me stop there, because that's my last slide, and turn it back to Jordan and see what questions we have.
All right, we do have a question. I'm going to go ahead and let Celia speak again.
Okay. Hi, Celia. Oops, still muted. There you go.
Hi, Jim. I have a question. You keep on mentioning the handbill. You didn't elaborate, I don't think, too much about it. Could you describe
Sure. Hang on just a second. I'm going to show you, if you guys will bear with me. I'm going to stop sharing this, and sometimes a picture is better. So I'll show you 2 things. Okay, so the first thing I'll show you is my resume. So the first thing I'm gonna shoot. What am I doing here? Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay, everybody see that? That's just a resume, right? It looks like a resume. It's got my name. It's got my, you know, my headline, my education, my experience. So a resume is something that you would use, you know, in the job submittal process, or even in networking one-on-one. You know, Celia and I are talking. I say, "Oh, great, Celia, let me send you my resume just so you have it." A handbill. Think of the handbill as kind of like the cereal box in the supermarket. It's advertising a little bit about me and the benefits, but it's not an actual resume. So this is a great example of a handbill. So it's got, you can see here. Oops, what am I doing here? Let me share. I wasn't sharing that. This is the problem with doing it virtually. Let me try this again. Celia, can you see that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So notice it doesn't look quite like a resume, although it's got a little bit of like a resume. It's got, you know, the same headline for my resume. It's got a very brief summary of my professional experience, but you know, I've added my how do I add value and what do I do? And most importantly, over here on the right-hand side, it shows who are my target positions and my target companies. So this is something I wouldn't give this to a prospective employer. I'd give it to you, Celia, and say, you know, Celia, my target, you know, in case you know anyone at Nanostar, you see that happens to be one of my target companies, and I'd love to meet, you know, the CIO or the CFO because or the VP of Finance, because that's where my value would come, you know, come into play. So it's really an advertisement of myself, but it's not the full formal resume, and it's something that I would give to networking contacts, not to a prospective employer.
Okay, thank you.
See the difference? And so,
Yeah.
so again, it's a networking device that helps people. And really the reason I give it, you know, I would give it to you so that you remember some key things about me. Because I know that, you know, you're a job seeker and you're going to run across, you know people and you're going to run across jobs and you'll say, well, that job doesn't fit me, but Jim, I think, you know, yeah, because I looked at his handbill and he said, yeah, that's one of his targets and that's one of his, you know, kind of target positions.
Mm-hmm. So would you post this on LinkedIn somehow then?
Not necessarily. You could, but it's more important to share it. So if you attend a job, you know, a networking group, like if you attended our career networking center every Wednesday, you know, we meet virtually with job seekers. This is something that you would post in the chat room on Zoom for other people to take advantage of.
Okay. Okay.
You want to get it in the hands of fellow job seekers because they're the people that are going to be your eyes and ears.
Okay.
You know, if it was a face-to-face meeting, if I was actually going to a face-to-face meeting, like we all used to do and hope we get back to soon, you know, I would make sure that I had like 50 copies of these and I'd take it with me and I'd, you know, hand them out to people. That's why we call it a handbill, because we actually want to hand it to people.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
What other questions do we have?
Any more questions for Jim? I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yep.
All right, feel free to type in the chat. Or we could unmute you. Let me see if I can see everyone. Here we go. Well, first off, thank you, Jim. That was great. If you have any further questions for Jim, I can send it to him. I think someone's typed in the chat here.
That's
there we
me.
go.
That's me. I was just gonna give
Wonderful, wonderful. And his information is going to be in the chat.
Give my email address in case you have questions for me.
And he has his email address here in the here. I'll send it to everyone.
Yeah.
In the chat. Oh, it doesn't like me copy and paste. Let me just type this out real fast for everyone. I hope I got it right. There we go. All right.
That's right.
So we'll wait for some more questions. Here's our contact information. If you have any further questions, if you want to book a one-on-one appointment, if you need any resume help with your LinkedIn profile, things like that, we can meet with you. We can initially focus on introductions. We don't have to jump into everything right away. So here's my contact information. Yeah, and here's our upcoming webinars. So we have one more coming up for September. That's CV 101. That's at 7 o'clock, same time. And then we have even more coming up, October, November, December, but I have October here for now. So we have our resume and cover letter basics. We have create a visible LinkedIn profile with a LinkedIn expert with Bruce Bixler, Job Search 101, and then emotional intelligence in your job search with Janice All. So we hope you would consider attending that. And we have a lot more webinars coming up related to our tech series, our business series, our writers workshops, our crafty adult. So again, look at our event calendar online, champaign.org/events for more information. And once again, if you have any questions, of course, I had my contact information there, but you can email librarian@champaign.org. You can chat with us just by visiting the homepage of our website. You can book a librarian with not just me, but our other specialists too, like the business librarian if you are trying to start a business or maintain a business, or our tech librarian. I'll see if there's any further questions here. Sorry, I meant to start my video again. I thought it was on, sorry. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar, Jim, if that's okay with you.
Yep. Thank you all.
All right. Have a great night, everyone. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.